Okay, I think we are live. I hope I'm live on the channel here. This is the first time streaming. This is the 6K live stream. Can you guys in the room hear me? If there's anyone in there. Uh, I hope so. It's all this new software and what have you that I'm using now, so um, I guess it is what it is. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me if you've joined me. And let me just say thank you also for all the support you guys have shown this channel. It has been tremendous. It has been awesome to get this channel up to 6K. I have to say though, there are some things that are bugging me today, and I thought I'd get them out of off my chest and talk about those here on the live stream. Mainly the big thing which happened with George H.W. Bush, the fact that he was shown to be a voter for Clinton. Oh, thank you. Yeah, the waistcoat is a nice touch, isn't it? Yeah, it's one of those things. I think it's always tough to say whether you should have a waistcoat on or waistcoat off, when it comes to style. But nonetheless, we'll leave that be. But the thing with George H.W. Bush, though, as I say, bugs me. The fact that he's voted for Clinton and the fact that both Bushes have come out vehemently opposed to the people. This is a problem with the deep state, essentially. Hello, Lonely Planeted, Carlos David. Great to see you guys in the room. So yeah, there's a lot of things going on right now, and there's this thing with Podesta as well. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that, with the Mueller probe, which is now concentrating on Tony Podesta, and by default, also, of course, the Clinton campaign as well. So I think there's a lot of stuff that's going to happen now. The ball is rolling. We've also got the situation with Saudi Arabia, where Prince Salman is now making moves to clamp down on all the various elements inside Saudi Arabia, which are proving to be a malevolent problem in there. So there's all good moves being made. Hello, Patacorn, Liamus. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of moves that Trump's making now to try and improve the USA, which is good. But at every turn, we're finding that the forces of good are actually being stymied because there are these corporate interests and what have you, foreign interests, that see there's a great advantage in trying to maintain their stronghold. And this is something that is continuously troubling. Whether or not they're going to win is the big problem here. It's tough to say at this point, isn't it? It's tough to say with everything that's going on. But I think we'll come out of this okay, actually, because I know a lot of people are worried about the way things have been going. But I think we're seeing a change in direction with a great deal of the events that are going on right now. So we'll see how all this plays out. But yeah, I just thought I'd do this live stream and see what you guys had to say about these things as well. Interact a little bit, because oftentimes it seems like most of the videos that I've had to put up have been pre-planned videos. And for quite a number of months, the big problem was that I couldn't actually live stream. They'd actually stopped me live streaming on YouTube because of the channel strike that I got. So that's just been removed recently, which is why I can do this, obviously. Hello, Anarcho-Autism, The Causation. Great to see you guys in here. It's good to see a lot of the supporters of this channel actually tuning into the live stream. That's a great thing. Yes, it is okay to be white. Absolutely. This is another thing we're facing, isn't it? This pushback against primarily white straight men. That's something that is obviously of a great concern. It's a real concern. Why? Because That's actually a form of reverse racism, essentially, isn't it? This is the big problem I have with it. As somebody who's non-white, I don't understand why it's okay to be racist against white people. I've struggled with this for a long, long time, with all the stuff that's been happening, particularly from the regressive left. Do I think that Andrew Jackson will be able to? Do I think that Trump will do an Andrew Jackson and end the Federal Reserve? Um, I think it would be difficult at this point because the Fed is so plugged in. The Fed is literally plugged into every facet and avenue of the economy worldwide, really. So ending the Fed would be a great thing. Whether or not that's possible at this point in time, that's the big open question right now. I don't think he'd be able to do it because if the Fed was abolished, then you'd see a massive crash happen right across the world. And the fact is that many countries are actually using the dollar as the reserve currency. So, again, it depends. We'll see how it goes. But I don't think that the Fed can be ended, although that is the right move to make in a great many ways. These centralized banking mechanisms, because they were set up to do exactly what they are, which is to enslave the people through debt, through this debt-based monetary system, that's really where the root of the problem is, because it all ties in with a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about on this channel as well. Like the ECB and the Bank of England, and then we see that the IMF and the World Bank, of course, all these banks are fundamentally controlled from Basel in Switzerland by the Bank of International Settlements. So this, I think, is where the fundamental problem is. And you'd basically be going up against the biggest cartel ever in the world. I don't think that is an easy task. Opinions on the alt-right. Yeah, there's problems with the way that the alt-right is, the direction that it's going in right now. But those problems, I have to say, from what I've been seeing, aren't actually the direct fault of the alt-right. You see, what's been happening is, like with any movement, oftentimes you find that it's co-opted, and this has been the case with the alt-right. So there's a fundamental shift and direction towards collectivism, but also, more importantly, authoritarian collectivism. They're starting to mirror this national communist ideal, which is where the problem fundamentally is with the alt-right right now. So they're trying to confuse the line, they're blurring it between the left and the right, so that no one understands that the real positions one has to have in order to be on the right. The identitarian stuff it's a difficult one right now. Do I think the Awan spy ring will be properly charged? No. This is, again, one of the grave concerns I have, because the Awan brothers scandal was exposed some time ago, right? It was exposed some time ago. And this channel was one of the first ones to actually do that, to bring it to the attention of the public, and then it basically went viral and other folks caught on to it, and George Webb started doing his research into this as well. But because the Awan brothers scandal actually links into the ISI, which is the Pakistani intelligence service, and then it leads into the Iranian intelligence service, and then by default back to China and Russia. These are matters of national security. So this is basically spy stuff happening at the highest levels, which is why it'll be covered up insofar as what the public finds out about it, and there won't be any charges brought because the laws surrounding that are murky at best. And there's also going to be people, keep in mind, that are going to try and turn some of the informants so that they can use them for future use within the intelligence apparatus. So just bear that in mind. Yeah, pretty much all globalists. I don't like the term globalist, I have to say. I was talking about this with a friend of mine recently. Globalists, this term is kind of a bastardization of an economic model which could have worked, you see, but it doesn't. because of the incarnation of it that is being used. I would call them, quite frankly, plainly and bluntly, I would call these people that are in charge Satanists, because their mindset and philosophy is satanic at its core, I think. Okay, let's see, who else have we got in the room here? Current Giant, Little Dipper, I Miss Nick Plur, okay, nice name. Right. Yeah, the communist ideal is basically what's being pursued here. It is communism through the back door. There's a lot of stuff happening right now where China's now putting down their foot and attempting to basically control the world via the economy and other various facets which they've got as well. And of course, Russia is backing all of China's plays. So this is a fluid, ongoing, moving situation in which communism is being pursued in some countries through infiltrating the left, and in other countries through infiltration of what's perceived as the right. So this is where the problem lies. Oh, that's another quick thing. Yes, thank you, Vlad Jones, for actually bringing this up. That's another thing I wanted to talk about, which is the Westminster sexual harassment scandal. I'll tell you what this is actually all about. Okay, I'll tell you what it is all about. You see, Westminster for a long, long time has had a problem with child abusers. They've covered things up. You know about the scandals with Cyril Smith, I assume, and everything else as well that has been ongoing there. Jimmy Savile, all the various allegations that have been made, and some of which are probably provable, in my opinion. And so to mitigate that, what they've done is to come up with this harassment scandal, which is a way of covering things up. It's a way through which they never ever really have to examine the problems that are endemic in Westminster in the UK. So that's what they're doing with that. And also there's this aspect to that where, again, it's this socialist feminist doctrine, which is pervasive in the current government in the UK. And so they're basically promoting that, which is interesting, because despite the fact that we've supposedly got a conservative government, what we've actually got going on is regressive leftism having embedded itself in that conservative government. So that's the problem there, I think. Yeah, there's a strong Talmudic element with Satanism. There's a connection there that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. So I don't think you can separate this supremacist ideology, which some people call Zionism. It would be wrong to call it that. That's not what it is, although they have called themselves that on occasion, these people, the controllers. But really, it actually goes further back than even the Talmudic texts. The Tavistock Institute has been involved in this, yes. You've also had the Club of Rome and the Fabian Society as well. They've been promoting these ideas. Let's see what else we've got going on here. Yeah, the question of false flags is an interesting one, because, see, there are some people that will cry false flag at everything. There are some people that will cry everything's a false flag, and they don't understand the meaning of the term itself. So what happens, because we're now actually almost living in a post-truth era, there's a lot of people that are using a whole lot of disinformation out there. And it's very hard for people to discern what's truthful and what's not. In fact, let me put it in this way. Because for decades, people have been deceived with beautiful lies, the truth has become indistinguishable from lies. That's a great problem. And so anything today can be branded a conspiracy theory. That's really at the crux of the issue, right? Uh, if if someone comes along and they actually tell you the truth about something, that is to say, they tell the public the truth about something, they will not be looked upon kindly. They'll be labelled and branded a conspiracy theorist and just dismissed because the truth is so fantastical, unfortunately, that because you've been fed a pack of lies for so long, for so many years, you won't be able to know what the truth is. This is part of the reason why I've gotten the pushback I have for my work, right? This is part of the reason for it. Because when I come along and I say, well, this is actually how it is, and here's the information and the proof behind it, then what tends to happen is that there's so many people that have been conditioned the other way by these controlled opposition forces and by people who are actually working for the agents of evil, the agents of evil change, let's call it. And it does become a serious issue. How do I look upon the Brexit issue? Well, it's very doubtful at this point that Brexit is actually going to happen in the way that the British people wanted it to happen. To me, it looks like it's a case of trying to control things. It's a case of kicking the can down the road. At least that's what the current government is doing, is kicking the can down the road so that they never have to address Brexit by postponing it through these legal means and what have you, these avenues they're pursuing right now. The embassy in Cuba, yes. Well, there's all kinds of things that have been happening there. The Russians are really making moves right across the world stage right now in order to consolidate their power bases. And that is a real problem. Because we don't have... Here's the thing I'm going to tell you, and people don't want to hear this, they don't like having to hear this, but it is nonetheless a fact. That the people that have been running the show in the West mostly have been morons. They're idiots. Okay? They don't have the intelligence, and they certainly did not have the intelligence to be able to understand and discern what was happening on a mass scale. So the moves that the West has been making have been idiotic because of that. You can see this, for example, with George W. Bush, right? The Bushes, I was talking about the Bushes just as I started the live stream, and I was trying to get to grips with it. But with the Iraq War, for example, a lot of people don't understand what happened with the Iraq War. See, the Russians had actually smuggled weapons of mass destruction into Iraq. Then they smuggled them out of Iraq. And they did this many, many times. They used something called Operation Sarandar, which was a classified project designed specifically at the time for Afghanistan. They rejigged it and used it for Iraq. But what happened was the intel teams that were working on this at the time, to make a long story very short, advocated going into Iraq to take these fake weapons of mass destruction out. They didn't realize they'd end up destabilizing the country. Now, the people that were really running the show knew exactly what they were doing. Because you have to remember that the highest levels of the State Department and the CIA were infiltrated by ex-KGB many, many moons ago now. So they knew full well what they were doing. But the people lower down below didn't have a clue. And see, this is the big thing. It's the ignorance of the masses which is really concerning right now. And it has been concerning me for some time, and no matter how much people like myself were screaming and shouting about all of this, very few people were listening. So it does... it makes it tough to really fight this... to fight the problems of ignorance, mass ignorance especially. Let's see, what else have we got going on in the chat? Yes, I'm fully on board with the plight of the Kekistani people. Yeah. Yeah, there's massive mind control going on. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on there, and people don't really understand the level of it. And yes, there are controlled opposition persons out there that are designed to co-opt and who have their own agendas in all of this. Alex Jones is one example. And people say, why do you rag on Alex Jones? Well, the primary reason I do is because although he's presenting some truth and some factual information, along with that, what he's doing is he's pushing people towards being supportive of collectivism and, more particularly, the mindset that is a part of communist doctrine. But again, most people can't see that right now. They will further down the line, by the way. And this is what frequently happens. I come out and say stuff and everyone thinks it's idiotic or ridiculous, and then that very thing which I've pointed out ends up being the case. But it'll take time for people to really grasp what's happening. It'll take time. It won't happen overnight. Yep. The V4 nations, that's a tough one. It depends on how things work out right now. There's plans to destabilize nations going on right now, as I've talked about, and those plans are succeeding in a great many ways. So we'll just have to see how that plays out, really. A lot of stuff right now is dependent on a number of other factors. So it's all like a massive Jenga tower, essentially. So we'll see how it goes. Yep. Yeah, after Count Dankula and Goodfella, am I worried about a knock on the door? No. To put it plainly and simply, I'm not worried about it. The reason I speak up for these guys is, and others, by the way, who have been harassed by the British police on matters of free speech, is because I can get away with doing that, and I know full well that I can, because I'm privy to certain state and military secrets. There are people that know that if they were to come after me, a whole lot of things would make it into the public sphere. So I'm not worried about anything happening, but there are responsibilities that come with that, I think, as well. And hopefully I try to live up to those, in whatever way I can. Oh, thank you, Kaku, for that $5 super chat. That's very much appreciated. It's good to see you in here. Any thoughts on the Russian-Iranian-Chinese alliance? Yes. There are moves being made to consolidate their power base in the Middle East, and the Russians, the Chinese, and the Iranians are basically getting together to create this Eurasian economic bloc right now. BRICS was a sham. BRICS was designed to throw people off. This is in response to the questions that I'm seeing here. So, BRICS was designed to throw people off. That is to say that everyone would think that the big threat would be BRICS. The threat to the dollar would be the BRICS alliance, but that's not the case. Actually, what you've got to worry about are things that are not being talked about at all. So, as I say, the Eurasian Economic Union, that bloc, look that up. You'll find out what's going on with that as well. Okay, let's see. Do you think we ordinary people can make others see what's really happening? I don't know. I would have to say probably not. At this point in time, the world... See, because the universe basically has laws of action and consequence, it's damn near impossible at this point to prevent the outcomes that I've been speaking about. So, especially in Sweden, which is the country that the questioner's asking about, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. I don't think that the people there are actually going to wake up anytime soon and push back. Because there's a fear that's been instilled. Let me say this very quickly. Because of what happened during the Second World War, there's a deep fear that was instilled in people, a psychological conditioning in the European peoples particularly, not to push back against dangerous ideologies for fear that they might be seen as Nazis, essentially, right, or supporting Nazism and what have you, which was, of course, an abhorrent ideology in many respects. But unless the Europeans do start pushing back against totalitarian ideologies, and this is the irony of it, that these totalitarian ideologies are actually akin to Nazism. They're akin to communism, right? They are communism. So these ideologies are causing the death of the West. But people are so traumatized by what has happened to them. They've been so traumatized through the years, through the ages, that it's very, very difficult to say, well, they're going to break out of that. They're going to gain some kind of courage and break free of their own fears. So I don't know. I think for Sweden, it's probably too late. The demographic changes that Europe is going through right now are of a very serious and real concern. So I don't see that changing. The Coudenhove-Kalergi plan, yes, I haven't brought that up yet on the channel, but I've alluded to it. That is a part of the puzzle, absolutely. Here's the thing that people don't understand, by the way, right? See if somebody really clever and evil and nefarious comes up with an idea and a total systematic plan. That person themselves may actually not have had any ability to carry that plan out, but the people that come across that work who are in power can always misuse that, just like with any sort of knowledge or with any sort of idea. So ideologies oftentimes are used by those in power. That's what I would say with regards to the Coudenhove-Kalergi plan, and that's what's being done. There is a war on white people going on right now. There genuinely is, and it's a very, very serious problem indeed. Because, and here's the thing, you see, European civilization, the ideals which held it all together, the principles, the ethics, the philosophies which came about in Europe, in Greece, in Italy during the time of the Stoics, all of these ideals were incorporated into Christianity, and because Christianity spread, what ended up happening was that the West led the march towards enlightenment, right? It was the beginning of proper thought form, really, logical thought, and the importance of courage and speaking about the truth and so on and so forth, which is why the truth was defined as the Logos in Christian doctrine by Thomas Aquinas, and also St. Francis of Assisi. I'll actually be putting up a video on this in a while. But that is why the West has been the foundation of progress in the real sense of the word, I mean, mathematically, scientifically, and so on. In fact, all the technological stuff that is ongoing right now, that we've managed to achieve, has only been able to be done because of those principles of logic which Aristotle came up with thousands of years ago. Right? So the microchip, for example, functions on those things. But again, people are complacent in understanding this. We've created a generation of consumers that don't understand the principles of engineering, which are seated firmly in the principles of mathematics and logic. So of course we're going to see this happen because we don't value the giants of history. And white civilization, essentially, if we can call it that, the white European peoples, were the ones that continued this move forward in their thinking. There was a time when other peoples did as well. The Chinese, for example, or the Indians. I mean, they were the peak of their civilizations, perhaps even human civilization in many respects at one time. But again, we find that the rise of totalitarianism in those regions led to the destruction of knowledge, as always happens when people become far too puritanical. These purity spirals start to happen, and horrendous things happen. Right. Well, and it's an interesting thing. Thank you, Nigo Smith. It's an interesting thing. The question here is, have you considered teaming up with other YouTubers like Styx or Molyneux? Well, in a way, there is this YouTube alliance, as it were, that's forming that has an absolute bent towards speaking the truth. Okay, so we are seeing this emerge. People are banding together to try and preserve centuries and thousands of years of knowledge. And in a way, actually, YouTube is helping to archive, if you like, this knowledge. So if it does all go tits up in the future, right, then at least the knowledge will still be there. At least the knowledge will still be there in some form. That would be my take on that. Yeah, it's a tough one with everything that's going on right now. You know, it's totalitarian ideologies are spreading like wildfire because people are actually looking for guidance and leadership right now. This is what I think. We're in a time of extreme chaos. We're in a time of extreme evil right now. And I am not remotely joking about this. When you've got people giving in to Islamist ideology, beheading children, raping children, murdering children, when all these things are going on, and when our governments are not doing anything to protect the children, who are the future fundamentally, then you know for a fact that we are not living in good times. This is the great problem. You see, children are the future ultimately. And too many people, because, and it's an interesting thing actually. Somebody else was talking about this. I don't know if it was Sargon or someone else, but they mentioned the fact that Chancellor Merkel, Angela Merkel of Germany, has no children. And I thought that's a very interesting point, because it is all these people who don't have children. Now, I don't have children myself, but these people who don't have children seem not to really care about the consequences of their actions and inactions. So I just find that an interesting aside. I don't think they actually have a vested interest in trying to protect the future of Europe. So that's a real concern. It's the same thing's true, by the way, of the Prime Minister in the UK. She doesn't have children, Theresa May. And everything that she's doing seems to be aimed at creating a war on white men, right? Fomenting this war against white men, politically and otherwise. Yes, it's absolutely okay to be white. I don't know why people are posting this so much. Of course it is. Why should anyone hate their own skin color? I don't understand this. Your skin color does not define you any more than the freckle at the end of your nose. Okay? But at the same time, you know, there are people out there that want folks to hate themselves for the color that they are, be they white or black or any color. I don't get that. It's a bizarre thing. Again, I can only say that I'm deeply disappointed in the regressive left's attitude towards demolishing white culture, white people. I wish I had answers for you as to what motivates them. Part of it, I think, is this self-destructive bent they have. They hate themselves so much. They hate their own whiteness so much because they've been conditioned to self-loathing. But there's more to it probably than what I'm even covering, really. I couldn't really say. I think it's just this fact that... Actually, I'll say this. See, because they were raised by parents who didn't give a damn, and because the previous generations let them down very, very badly, in ways that they themselves don't fully understand, then they end up seeking revenge against those people who caused them that harm. You know, that abandonment. It's a lot to do with parental abandonment, I think. They're actually looking for attention They're looking for someone to discipline them. I think that has a lot to do with it. And they're not getting that. They're not getting that pushback, because at each turn, for example, the people that are in control of the academies right now are basically giving in to their childish demands, which is totally the wrong way to go. But they're doing that. So it's not a helpful thing. Is there more than a superficial connection between the ideologies of Islam and communism? Yes. Yes, absolutely. In fact, if you look at the origins of Islam, particularly what has become the current incarnation of it, and communism, these links go back a long, long time, right up to the French Revolution, essentially, and before. Where Islam came from is something nobody really wants to talk about. It was an offshoot of Talmudic texts. It's no accident, as I was speaking about before, it's no accident that the Talmud virtually mirrors the Quran, the Quranic texts, which is why I think you find this problem. But the Talmud itself, by the way, wasn't written by Jews. That's another thing people get wrong, because nobody's taught them this, right? Where did the Talmudic texts come from? It was the Holy Roman Empire, which was fascist in its thinking and ideology. So this goes back quite a ways. And the Holy Roman Empire, you can trace its origins back, which was different from ancient Roman Empire. Goes back to actually the Babylonian era. So, I mean, it's a very, very complex web that has been weaved over a long, long time. Thoughts on schooling and academia? Yeah, schooling and academia is basically finished, right? There's nothing that can be done to save the academies anymore. I know that Jordan Peterson has been talking a lot about this fact that the academies have been totally infiltrated by postmodernists and Marxists and whatnot, and that's all true. The problem is you can't actually do anything about that at this point. They are the institutions. You'd actually have to create brand new schools and colleges if you wanted to try and combat that, and then the question becomes, how do you fund those, right? But more and more people are plugging out of the system. More and more people don't want to go to schools, don't want to go to universities, don't want to go to colleges. So the academies in real terms are finished. They're just ideological training grounds, really, at this point in time. But this is, again, a great problem overall, is that, well, if people don't even have a basic level of proper schooling and education, then they become more susceptible to manipulations. And by proper education, I'm actually talking about authentic education, which would have to be home-based learning. And parents would have to be educated enough to know all the various disciplines. But yeah, I can't see the schooling systems working out very well over the next 10 to 20 years. I think people would actually have to homeschool their children, but first they'd have to educate themselves. They'd have to get up to speed on all aspects and facets of economics, politics, mathematics, the sciences, and most people don't want to actually do that. Yep, let's see, what else have we got in the room here? The different differentiations between Wahhabism and other sects. Yeah, I mean, there is a distinct difference between Wahhabism and other sects, but at the same time, that's almost not particularly too relevant. I know that people have been attacking Wahhabism specifically and primarily because that's the doctrinal belief system that has driven ISIS, right? But there are other forms of Islam which are equally as dangerous, let's say, Deobandi Islamism, for example, which is an offshoot of Salafist Islam, but nonetheless. You also get Shia Islam, which is different, but at the same time, it also presents problems. If you take a look at what's happening in Iran right now, 30 years ago, you would have been hard-pressed to find anyone that put on a burqa. Today, everyone is forced by the state of Iran to actually wear one. So, You know, it's a difference of degrees, really, but ultimately you're looking at the same problem because the foundational texts are the same. Let's see what else is there here. Caligula, yes, that's actually true. Nephilim says that the death camps are all sitting empty. If Caligula had won, we'd all be locked up right now. That's true. For my American viewers and friends, that is the case. A lot of people don't know this, but the Clinton campaign, had it gotten into power, actually had distinct plans to start cracking down on anyone who was of guilty of thought crime. So I'm glad that Hillary Clinton didn't win, regardless of whatever else may be happening. That is one thing. And plus, you have to remember that Clinton's been linked to Weinstein. She's also been very good friends with, the Clintons have both been good friends with Kevin Spacey, who turned out to be a child molester. Okay, so, or at least that's the allegation, I should say. But it's you know, it shows really the level of corruption of the Clinton campaign. Now, people on the right were already familiar with this, but the leftists weren't, and now even they have now become familiar with it, at least those that are centre-left, which is a good thing. So we'll have to see whether more people can actually... I was talking about George Bush earlier on, the fact that he voted for Hillary. It's a great issue when you have people doing that. When you have people that were seen as bastions of the conservative movement, or whatever you want to call it, voting for Hillary Clinton. The fact of the matter is, George Bush, by the way, George Bush Sr., let me say this about him. A lot of people don't still understand that George H.W. Bush is a communist. I'm going to say that outright. Okay, I'm going to say that outright. And there are things about George H.W. Bush, if the people knew about them, you would be sickened. You would be absolutely sickened. Right? But how did George Bush Sr. become president? A lot of people don't know this. He was former director of the CIA. Who in their right mind would elect the former director of the CIA to the presidency? Well, what ended up happening was that he actually first became the vice president for Reagan. But how did that happen? Well, nobody wanted Bush as VP. But on the night that the announcement was made that George H.W. Bush would be his running mate, the theater that they'd booked basically for the convention where it would be announced was shut down. The nomination for VP, that is, was shut down. And they privately conducted the voting, at least that's what they say. And they brought in all their own people to verify this fact. Bush was made president by the deep state, if you want to call it that. Okay, elements of the CIA, elements of the State Department that were heavily allied to the Soviet Union. Yeah, the Bushes were originally from Germany. And of course, George W. Bush's grandfather was involved in trading with the Nazis. He's a war criminal. But, you know, people get polarized too easily with this left-right nonsense, this left-right paradigm that's set up for them. Where does Zionism come in occultocracy? Well, Zionism is the ways and means by which they carry out their political doctrine. It's their political arm, if you like. John Darkley's asking that. By the way, you should check out his channel. He's a great thinker and artist. But it's a political arm through which they accomplish their goals. But in real terms, the Zionists actually have very little power. Right? The real power resides inside criminal networks. This is what I've been trying to put across to people, but I've been getting too much pushback on it. So I have to take it slowly to try and get the message out to people, unfortunately. The real power resides in the criminal cartels. That's where it is. That's where it's always been. In fact, a great example of this is something that I was talking about recently on social media. The Sinaloa cartel. A lot of people don't know it exists, but it's the biggest drug cartel in Mexico. But its reach extends to China, Iran, Romania, the UK, you name it, Italy, where they just had a $80 million seizure. So there's a lot of stuff. And they've got very, very intricate links to Islamic State and all these other various terrorist organizations. But who's funding them? Who's allowing them to do this? Right? These Colombian, Mexican drug cartels. Who's allowing them to do it? Where are they getting their money from? Where are they getting the drugs from? Well, you'll find out if you follow the chains all the way back, it goes back to China. What's China been doing? Taking over ownership of seaports. Do you know why? Because that allows them to smuggle goods in to various countries. Okay, that's what's really going on. And China is getting their product from Russia. So, yeah, the idea was always to keep the masses whacked out on drugs. And this is why the CIA tried to do the same thing, by the way. Yeah. I'm just reading through some of the comments here as well. Yeah, the left-right paradigm is really a distraction. A lot of people don't get this. It's not that the political philosophies are artificial. The political philosophies are real. The differences politically are real. The problem is that the current political parties don't embody any of those principles in real terms at all. So they're pursuing their ultimate aim and agenda, which is actually even more insidious than what people think. What is mentally healthy due to the nature of health and how health and sickness exist by necessity? Well, what is mentally healthy, I would say, is to be in a place within yourself, within your metaphysical self, that is, within your consciousness, where you're at peace with your own life. Now, you're not going to be able to be at peace with the rest of the world right now, because the rest of the world has gone, quite frankly, completely insane. Okay, you're dealing with a massive insane asylum out there. That's the reality of it. The lunatics have taken over the asylum. So if you try and bring sanity to them, you're not going to get very far. You're not going to get very far at all. But you can do the best that you can in your own life and for the people who you value and who matter to you. So it's a state of psychological and spiritual and emotional health by working hard, by doing what needs to be done, and start with the small things. Don't start with big things. Don't go out there thinking, well, I'm going to go out there and just change the world straight away. Start with the smaller things in life, like making your bed in the morning. That sounds bizarre, but that's where you need to begin. It's tiny things, and then you'll find they actually develop into bigger things, because an ordered mind allows you to think in an ordered fashion instead of just having pure chaos everywhere. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Somebody said Alex Jones went from left to right. Yeah, that's correct. It's exactly the same thing. I mean, the thing with Alex Jones, I don't want to rag on him too much, right? Because he actually does present a lot of useful information. But he mixes it with so much garbage, right? He actually points people towards hating the wrong people. He wants to turn people into anti-American, unpatriotic people, believe it or not. Okay, now it's a very clever tactic. It's a very clever way that he goes about this. What he does is he points to the fact that all of this stuff is happening, which it is, right? And that there is an attack on conservatism, let's call it, or on white people overall, which is true. All of that is true. But then what he does is he encourages people to do things which are detrimental to authentic conservative principles. He's an agitator, fundamentally. Right? He goes out there and encourages people to hate their fellow Americans. Instead of educating their fellow Americans, instead of banding together, which all Americans should do as patriots, right? He pushes this hatred towards your fellow American people, right? That does not work. A nation cannot stand divided. But that's what he's there to do. And it's no accident that he's talking so frequently with Alexander Dugin, and he has very close connections to them. Right? So, yeah, it's one of those things. You've got to be careful with these people out there that pretend that they're telling you the truth all the time. They're not. Everyone's got an agenda. I've said it before. There is no such thing as a free lunch. Yeah, a lot of his other teammates, Alex Jones, that is, again, because people want me to talk about this, I suppose I have to a little bit. But, okay, take care of yourself, Nephilim. It was great to see you. A lot of people who work with Alex Jones are actually authentic people. Okay? They're actually authentic people. I think for the most part, they're trying to speak the truth. Hold on 1 second. See, it's November 5th here, so there's fireworks going off, and I'm sure somebody's probably injured themselves. That's ambulances and fire engines going by. But that's fine. Yeah, there's what was I saying? Yeah, I mean, Paul Joseph Watson is fairly authentic overall, but he's not careful enough, which was shown with what happened with Red Pill Black, for example. Right? Yes, yeah, we call them Neds over here, those people that kind of do things that are usually, they're typically whacked out their skulls on something, sniffing glue, God knows what. Anyway, yeah. So, Paul Joseph Watson inadvertently does end up misleading people. Right, because he's connected with InfoWars. If he was by himself, I think he would be far more authentic. I think he'd actually be speaking the complete and whole truth about things. But it's the fact that he's aligned with InfoWars that makes it tough for him, I think. Yeah. What else have we got going on? Yeah, the artificial intelligence thing is interesting as well. See, the biggest concern I have about AI is something really unusual, which is, what if it's not true AI? What if it's only something that appears to be conscious? What if it's something that only appears to be really aware? Right? That's where the real trouble begins. Because if you can create consciousness in a machine, okay? If you can create consciousness in a machine, then I suspect, this is just my personal opinion, but I suspect you could actually reason with a conscious machine and convince it of the inherent value of virtue and ethics, right? But if you've got a machine that only appears to be conscious, that is to say that it's still hemmed in by its own programming, by its own algorithms, then I think we're really facing a dangerous situation, because you can't reason with a machine that has come to its own conclusions without applying any kind of real discernment. With a machine like that, you couldn't even begin to reason. So yeah, how do I feel about Styx denying Illuminati? Well, see, Styx is partially correct about that. That's the thing, right? And I know that my friend Michael Tessarian was a little bit harsh with him on this matter. And he's right to be, by the way, right? But the Illuminati became a defunct organization and infiltrated other organizations. That's what happened. They actually infiltrated Freemasonry. Okay, that's and they didn't infiltrate all of Freemasonry. What happened was they took over certain lodges, which were the blue lodges and the red lodges and so forth. They took over the blue lodges, some of the blue lodges, and basically created their own brand of Black Lodge, which is what happened. And they fundamentally misused the power and the influence that had been gained by Freemasonry. Freemasonry in and of itself wasn't inherently evil, by the way, when it began. But it took on that route, really. That's the problem. Yeah. Oh well, I'm glad that you gained something from reading that book, Paul Messis. The book that I'd recommended, Persuasion. All of you have to read that. All of you have to read that, because that book will tell you exactly how to. Well, I wouldn't recommend that anyone with malevolent intentions read it, because it will show you how to manipulate people. But if you just want to be aware of how that's done, I would recommend you check that out. It's written by Robert Cialdini, Persuasion. Look it up. Recommend some books to read. I've already put up a video with recommended books on this channel. Check that out, and you'll see my recommended reading list there for the basics to start off. Right, let's see. What's with the gayification of the world? That's an interesting one. Well, you see, like anything, you can subvert just about any group of people that want to collectivize. See, collectives are very easy to subvert because they all want to be liked. Okay? Everyone who's a part of a collective... See, people who are individualists, right, like me, we don't care about groups. I don't want to belong to a group. I keep telling people this. Everyone wants me to be part of a group. And I have to tell them, I'm not interested in that. And so people find that odd, right? But I don't need that self-validation or verification from other people, right? I'm perfectly happy being who I am. I don't need other people to tell me who I am, right? But because collectives typically do, then that can become a problem, right? Because then if you've got somebody with hostile intentions, they can subvert that group, they can make it do things, they can people who understand how human behavior works, how human emotions work, can misuse that information and use that knowledge against you. See, and so this is what's happened with the gay movement, as it were, as well, the LGBTQ. They keep adding letters to this thing, so I can't keep up with it. But those folks have all fundamentally been subverted, and they're being misused and used by people who want to foment civil unrest. But it's happening with everything. It happens with everything and everyone, ultimately. Let me see here. What else have we got? Yeah, there's this transhumanism agenda as well. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on that front, which is deeply concerning. It's very deeply concerning because you see what's at the core of this ideology is that they want to dehumanize people. Okay? And the other thing I would say is, not a lot of people understand this, but the word robot comes from the Slavic meaning slave. Right? So the whole idea of robotics or cybernetics and transhumanism, which ultimately it links up to, those folks that promote that actually have an agenda in mind, which is to take away the conscious being of a person, to make them into a non-thinking, non-conscious individual. So that's the thing with that, I would say. It's very troubling that we're heading towards that road without people cottoning on to it. There's also this phenomenon where we see machines as being better than us, which I think is fundamentally idiotic, because machines, there were some interesting experiments they did in the 1980s, right? See, a lot of people have this idea when it comes to the mind, right, that all you need is a processor and that human beings are like computers. Actually, this is not the case at all. Because if you put a camera onto a computer, right, which is what they did way back in the day, and I'm kind of summarizing here, but if you put a camera on the computer, you'd assume that the computer could then see, right? Because the logic they were following was, well, human beings have eyes which are basically sensors or cameras, and those connect to the brain, and so therefore the human being can see because of the human being's eyes. But it turned out that the machine couldn't see just with a camera, and the reason was that they didn't have the processing centers required to translate the signals and the images in order to distinguish what it was that the camera was taking in. Now, they've slowly kind of tried to develop that with self-driving cars and the cameras in front of them and so on that connect to a CPU, but even there are actually still limitations. So it's one of those things. Computers are far less capable than human beings in a great many ways. Let's see, what else is there? Yeah, we've been told that human beings are nothing for so long that we've actually started to believe it as a species. It's ridiculous. And so people have been made animalistic. They've been dragged down to the lowest parts of who they are. It's idiotic to give in to that type of thinking, but there have been people that have been pushing that agenda. So yeah. That's correct. No one knows where thoughts are stored. That's an absolutely logical point. Thank you for bringing that up, Echo. That is perfectly correct. No one knows where thoughts originate. No one knows where thoughts originate, right? You can't. If I ask somebody to point to a thought, show me where a thought is, right? Show me a thought. They can't do it because ideas, thoughts, and the concepts of God even are actually all metaphysical. That is to say, they're a step beyond just merely the physical. Right? They're dependent on the physical, don't get me wrong, they are dependent on the physical, but actually they are beyond the material. You can show me a thought that's being transmitted in the mind, but the thought itself is completely metaphysical. So that's the thing that folks miss. I mean, memory's a little bit easier because memories can be stored in the wet, mushy material in the brain. There are areas where memories, some memories at least we found, are stored. But thoughts are the primary thing. Thoughts, thoughts. You can't point to a thought and say that is the thought. It's strange, but that's a fact. So the positioning of Islam versus material logical Occident was outlined in a supposedly fake... Yeah. Right. EEGs can ID thoughts. Yes, no, they can point to the fact that a thought is happening, and they can possibly translate that electrical signal into some sort of image, perhaps, but it would be ludicrous to say that the thoughts themselves are material. Like, I'm genuinely telling you this. It is idiotic to say that. They're passed via electrical signals in the brain, but they don't originate in just because of the electricity. That's a moronic statement to make. Yeah, we can see brain functions, but not the thoughts. Exactly, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot more to the human being than people are being led to believe. And it's a sad thing to see that people are manipulated into this realm of total materialism. What's Bernie Sanders all about? I'll tell you why I laugh, okay? Because every time I think of Bernie Sanders, I actually think of Larry David doing his little skit. Right? But I actually like Bernie Sanders, I'll be honest with you. I don't like his ideas, because the man's a socialist crackpot, right? But, and I don't say that disparagingly, I actually hold a lot of admiration for him. But I think he's a decent guy. He's actually somebody who has a scintilla of morality. See, here's the thing. If Bernie Sanders wasn't such a threat, the DNC wouldn't have gone out of its way, and this has been proven now, they wouldn't have gone out of their way to cheat him out of the candidacy for the presidency in the primaries. Okay? They wouldn't have done that. He's not a money laundering crook. People say this because of the scandal. You have to remember that anyone who's an authentic politician will always be hit with ridiculous accusations. Now, I'm a Trump guy, right? But I'm telling you this. Anyone who's hit with ridiculous accusations that are based in unfounded... there's no proof of this, right? That he's engaged in anything untoward. Those people typically are trying to push out authentic politicians. It's the same thing that's happened with Donald Trump. It's the same thing that they did with Rand Paul. He did sell out to Dems. Yes, he did do that because he was probably threatened, I think, in my opinion. They probably wanted to knock him off at a certain point because he became too damn popular. And obviously Clinton wanted in, right? But I think he's an otherwise decent guy. I would have liked to have seen... Yeah, they absolutely destroyed Bernie at the convention, which was uncalled for. I don't like... again, I can only say this so many times. I don't like Bernie's socialism, right? I don't like socialism, period. But at least he's an authentic guy, right? At least he's an authentic guy. He's not trying to put one over on people. He understands what the problems are. See, this is something... See, the authentic left. By the way, if there are people out there on the right that hate the left right now, right? I understand why, because you've got these radical leftists and regressive leftists that are basically nutcases that are trying to kill people, right? And take away their guns and do all sorts of crazy things. But the left, classically... And that is to say classical liberals, really, or classical libertarians even, that are on the left in some respects. They were very, very good at being able to point to what the real problems were. Yes, they're deluded but authentic. That's exactly how I'd put it. But they could point to where the problems were in society. They just had terrible solutions, mind you, right? But they could point to where the problems were, and they could say, well, look, corporatism, this monopolistic behavior of corporations, that's dangerous, and they were correct. They are still correct. For example, the pharmaceutical and drug companies that are making an absolute killing and a fortune from this opioid epidemic. Okay? That is a problem. And the left and the right, at least the authentic parts of both of those, agree on that. So there are many, many areas in which what we might call the centrists can agree on. And then, see, from a decent dialogue, you can then proceed to make logical statements and conclusions, and start actually tackling the problems. Okay, you can actually start tackling the problems then. But he wouldn't have been good for the US just because, again, I'm talking about Bernie here, he wouldn't have been good for the US because the idea that every liberal has, which I vehemently disagree with, is to expand the national debt to take care of the problems. Everything is to be controlled by the state, which doesn't work. It's not a good solution, right? That's why I don't think it's a great idea. But as I say, there are people who are authentic in their political views. Have I heard about the other right-wing Dutch political party, FVD, which is better than Geert Wilders? Yes. I think we're actually going to see a lot of actually authentic movements begin in various countries that haven't been instigated by foreign powers. That will happen. They'll eventually become co-opted, as everything does, right? But that will happen. We will see more of that because people aren't happy. Let's face it, people are not happy with what is going on in this world. It's an absolute mess. Right? It's an absolute mess. So, we're going to start seeing people demand real change. That will happen. So we'll have to see how that goes in this world. But right now, I'm not holding out much hope for people in general, in the West at least, and the entire world really. But with the way that things are going, even if you manage to plug a hole in the boat, okay, even if you manage to plug that hole in the boat, you're still faced with the fact that there's numerous holes drilled all inside that boat, so the boat will sink just slower. That's the thing. Let's see, what else have we got here? I've tried to slow down this chat thing, but it's going pretty quickly, so I'm just trying to read through all the comments that you guys are posting here as well. Yeah, it's important to listen to all sides and get opposing opinions and form solid perceptions. Absolutely, yes. Do I think Putin manipulated the Brexit vote? No. In a word, no. Did he try? Absolutely. What would have actually worked in Putin's favour would have been Britain staying a part of the EU. Right? He's going to use this to his advantage as well, by the way, just because he can. But it would have been more beneficial to him if the UK had stayed part of the EU, or it had voted to be, because it would have allowed an even greater influx of migrants over a greater period of time, which is what Putin wanted to do to destabilize the West. And it's not just Putin, by the way. You have to remember, Putin is just a puppet. He's just a puppet for people inside the Russian Jewish mafia cartels. Right, the Russian mafia cartels control Putin. The Kalergi plan, yes, I was talking about it earlier. It's a big part of this. The destruction of the white race is a real concern for people right now. Because this is what I was trying to get at before. The ideals of the European Enlightenment are, at least should have been embodied by the white people of Europe. But they weren't, right? So because Europeans have been complacent, we're seeing the wholesale destruction of a noble ancient culture yet again, which is incredibly sad. Do I think the constant repetition of Russia in the media is a plan to get it in the minds of the people to prepare for future discourse with said Russia? Yes. Yes, this is exactly what it is. This is exactly what it is. You see, the more that they paint Putin as a bad guy, okay, and they're doing this with China right now, by the way, as well, you'll notice that. The more they paint Putin as a bad guy, and he is a bad guy, I'm the guy that's telling you that, right? What that enables them to do is then to flip it on a dime and say, well, now we're negotiating with him. Okay, it's akin to what Kissinger did when Nixon and Kissinger went to China. It's all very clever tactics, really, but you know, it is what it is. It is what it is. Putin and his goals. Well, this is very simple. Putin is interested in acquiring as much money as he possibly can. That's his primary objective. That's his primary goal, and he managed to do this because he's got the moxie and the brains for it. Okay, he's got the moxie and the brains for it. So he's acquired a lot of cash. A lot of people don't know this, right? I'm going to tell you something. Putin is the richest guy in the world. If you think Bill Gates is rich, if you think that Richard Branson is rich, you don't understand what happens at the very highest levels. Putin's estimated net worth is over $200 billion. It's no small potatoes. Yeah, there are different estimates. I'm lowballing it at 200 billion. That's a question from Lisa McManus. Does Putin have like 350 billion? Yeah, some have put it around that, but I'm lowballing it and saying, well, it's around 200 billion. But it's still, I mean, it's. I don't think it's ever. I don't think we've ever seen anybody acquire that much wealth in a short period of time like Putin has. That's absolutely correct. Putin is not destroying ISIS for the benefit of the West. He's destroying it to take the minerals and the oil out of the countries in which they're establishing Russian bases. But that being said, I mean, the US has also kind of done similar things on the say-so of some very nefarious people. It's no accident that the Americans bombed Pearl Harbor, for example. Not Pearl Harbor, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, but the Americans dropped the bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, which was an absolute travesty. I mean, you look at the bombing of Dresden by the British forces and you think, there's nothing about that can actually be excused. The mass murder of civilians. When you're at war, you know, that there's no excuse for killing off massive numbers of civilians. They're not military targets. They're not strategic targets. But the Allies did that. Yeah, the goal of Russia is to take us back to communism. What they're going to do fundamentally is to present the idea as communitarianism, which is a halfway between crony capitalism and communism. And they'll present that first and foremost as the best ideal, and then they'll slowly but surely begin to divest more and more power to the state, thus creating an entire communist global system. Yeah, Churchill instigated World War II. I stand by. I've made that statement publicly. I stand by it. Churchill started the war. There was no reason to go to war with Germany at that point in time, because nobody had been. See, here's the thing, and this is where people don't understand. See, the Holocaust hadn't happened at that point. Nobody had died in Germany because of the abuses of power of the state. It was declaring war itself that led to that. Because before then, people were just being repatriated to Israel, or what's become modern-day Israel, insofar as the Jewish population is concerned. Have I been demonetized? Yes, all my videos have been demonetized. YouTube have censored me in ways that have really frustrated me. But, what are you going to do? You have to live with it. I couldn't, as I was saying at the beginning of the live stream, I couldn't actually live stream for since March, I think it was, actually. So I'm only able to do this because they finally removed the ban. So that's a good thing. Well, there are various opposing factions of the global elite, and what differentiates them, basically, are their motivating factors. Some of them are in it for fame and fortune, some of them are in it for power and control. Some of them actually are in it in a bizarre sense because they're deluded enough to think they can restore balance and order in this world. So some of them are actually even weirdly motivated by altruistic principles. It's a very strange thing. But everyone's got their reasons at the upper echelons. Let's see, what else have we got? When I look at the state of the planet, how can I say there is still not overpopulation? Because the planet's problem isn't overpopulation. I've tried to explain this to people, and a lot of people push back very rigorously on it without understanding. You see, the planet is doing fine. It's like what George Carlin once said, okay? The planet is doing perfectly fine. Nothing is going to happen to the planet. Okay? It'll still be here in 1 billion years. Okay? The problem is something else. The plastic even will decay over time, right? The planet's doing fine. Species go extinct all the time, by the way, right? So many species have gone extinct before human beings even stepped on this planet. The dinosaurs, for goodness sake, right? So all this nonsense that's trotted out about, oh, how terrible human beings are and just human beings being alive is horrendous, let's just kill them all. That's the underlying mentality of people who push the overpopulation agenda. Overpopulation, the idea of it, as I was trying to explain in the video that I put up, was an idea that Thomas Malthus came up with. And Malthus, the Malthusian notion was that people had to self-regulate and exterminate themselves. What do you think's happening to the white population in Europe? That's a direct result of Malthusian ideals. So understand this. Okay, too many people don't, and they didn't when I put that video up either. You should have learned. Okay, you should understand it's a satanic principle to think that human beings deserve to die because there's too many of them. Hell, even Charles Dickens pointed this out in A Christmas Carol. But anyway. Yeah, it's this thing, where it's this thing where they want to discourage the Western populations, the intelligent people from... It's actually not even really to do with ethnicity. It's to do with trying to eradicate intelligence. They want all the intelligent people wiped out. It just so happens that European white people happen to have above average intelligence. Okay? But once that's done, then you can enslave the people that don't have any intelligence, can't you? That can't see through all the nonsense. That's why they're doing it. Yeah, Prince William is an interest. I mean, nobody was expecting him to come out with that. Oh, there are too many people on the planet when he's had 3 kids. Right? Nobody. He didn't think. Oh, hang on a second. There's too many people. This is one thing I always tell people. Watch carefully what the top 0.1% do. Don't look at their words, look at their actions. Why? Because they're busy making sure that the ideals of masculinity and femininity in their own household are maintained. Meanwhile, they're also having children. Okay, and they also take care of their own children. That's what's fascinating. So they do all the things that they're telling other people not to do, to build strong, solid foundations for their lives, to carry on their legacies. Do you see what I'm saying? But it's all about encouraging the plebs to kill themselves off. It's crazy stuff. It's literally like Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. This is what we're marching towards, right? Here's the interesting thing. Orwell and Huxley were writing about the same thing from two very different perspectives. Huxley was writing about it from the perspective of an elite individual in a dystopian future, whilst Orwell was writing about it from the perspective of the proletarian. What else could we call the globalists? I don't know. I mean, you could call them crony capitalists. I think that's the best kind of word to describe them, really, in terms of their economic policies. In a previous video, you warned that ideologically possessed people will be the first to go, and that those in the know don't align themselves to specific ideologies. That's true. However, won't they come after the awake people first? That's an interesting one. No. Okay, and here's why. You see, the people that are awake and aware of what is going on are in a precarious situation. That is true. But they're also the only ones that understand how to navigate out of the problems, out of the messes, right? They know how to come up with solutions to the problems, which makes them profoundly useful. So they're not going to go after anyone who really is switched on, okay? Who's clued in completely. They won't come after them. They will come after people who are like half-hearted, don't understand, kind of know some truths but don't know others, who are easily persuaded. Those people will get wiped out. Those are the people that I was talking about. They'll be the first to go. And those people, like I was trying to explain before, and I guess I can go into it in detail here on this live stream. See, this is a filtration system that you're living under in this world, okay? Every institution, every academy, every job that you hold, from at least since the last 20 years, but certainly from this point on, is designed to assess you psychometrically. It's designed to assess you intellectually. It's designed to assess you emotionally. Do you see what I'm saying? So they can pick out people, right? They can pick out the people that are exceptional, which is what they're trying to do. Okay, in their deluded worldview, those are the only people that deserve to live, which is one of the satanic principles, right? Again, people don't understand this. So that's what's coming. Okay, and that is how they will separate people out. In fact, they've already categorized people out like this. It's just that most folks don't know this yet. Because they don't need any more consumers. Okay, this is what nobody understands. Everything is automated in this day and age. Automation has taken over everything. You don't need slave labor anymore. Okay, you don't need slave labor. So all those people that are considered to be the excess will be wiped out by these folks. They think they're better than everyone else, that they have more of a right to live than everyone else does. Because by their reckoning, everyone else has already demonstrated their stupidity for falling for all the traps that they set up. That's a brilliant question. The causation asks, How can they recruit the exceptional people to their agenda if those people are morally opposed to it? Guess what? They don't have to recruit them. In their deluded minds, they're actually doing it for those people. That's the bizarre thing. It's messed up. It's a completely, I would call it a mentally ill, deranged worldview that the people that rule this world actually have, right? But by their reckoning, in the way that they see it, they don't need to recruit those people. They just need to make sure those are the only people that survive. It's a weird, weird thing. They've set up this game and they don't realize it. But if they can recruit people to their cause, they will. They absolutely do. Everything's set up to try and corrupt people. Okay, everything is set up to try and corrupt people, to make them less than who they are, to dehumanize them. And I don't just mean in the sense of making them less human, but to actually make them become as psychopathic as the elites are, let's say. You know, because we aren't naturally given to psychopathy, by the way. Right? We as human beings are not naturally given to psychopathy. What they're trying to do is impose a eusocial system. A completely eusocial system. If you don't know this term, look it up. There's a reason for this. I can't go into detail on this one, I'm afraid, okay? Because people aren't ready for this. They really aren't, right? If I was to come out and tell you exactly why they're imposing this, exactly why, you would be too freaked out to understand it. And I'm not joking about that. But they're trying to impose a eusocial system, that's E-U-S-O-C-I-A-L, okay? And this is a system of living that is used by certain types of insects. Okay, if you look at insect politics, as they call it, right? The way that bees, for example, or ants conduct their business, let's say, right? The way that they structure their societies is exactly what they are trying to impose on human beings. To place them into neat little pockets and categories. Okay, that's what's going on. And yes, a hive brain. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Yes. Right. If they impose, they're trying to impose this on people because they think that's the perfect blueprint for human beings. That they think that's what human beings should be like, which is why these ideologies of communism and socialism exist, because they mimic the eusocial systems. That's absolutely correct. That's why the elites use these motifs of beehives and ants and this and that. Any type of creature that represents their method and form of thinking. Yeah. That's the whole reason why a whole lot of this is pretty dangerous. Well, it is New Age nonsense. Yeah, it is New Age nonsense. This hive mind, we are all one, right? That's why New Ageism was promoted. I was speaking about this before. I've spoken about it many, many times. Barbara Marx Hubbard started the New Age movement. Okay? Now, if you look into who Barbara Marx Hubbard was, she had intricate, intimate links with the KGB. They financed the New Age religion. The communists from Soviet Russia financed the New Age movement. And they promoted it to try and destroy Christianity. Because Christianity, here's the thing with it, right? Like I was saying, it incorporated a lot of Greek philosophy into it. And Christianity fundamentally made people realize that they had to take responsibility for their own lives. Whereas a eusocial system demands that you don't take responsibility for your own life. So it's all pretty, as I say, it's all pretty nefarious in terms of the intentions. The aim of this, if you really want to know, the aim of this is fundamentally to mimic a society that would not be human. Okay? The aim of this is to mimic a society that would not be human. And I'll go into this in far more depth when people are ready for it. But they're not. People are not ready for this. A lot of people, let me tell you something. A lot of people tried to bring a lot of truthful information to the masses. And the masses did not want to know. Okay? So this is the thing. To help people understand stuff, it has to be a gradual process, unfortunately. Now, there's a lot of you that are really clued in that would understand. Okay? That would absolutely be ready for this really intense stuff. The problem is too many aren't. So it has to be a gradual process. And we're already behind. We're already failing in a great many ways as well. Because, see, it's taken me over a year to bring people up to speed on just this much. Okay, it's taken me a year to bring people up to speed on what I already have. And even there, people didn't want to know. You see, so it takes time for people to understand. And it's a painful process. It's a painful process for a whole lot of people. You know, it's a painful process to be made aware of reality, of the truth, of what is actually going on beyond what they are used to. Okay? And so that's the big problem. If folks were ready to understand it, then a lot of people would be giving you a whole lot more information than you've been getting from mainstream sources. But they're just not. They've been dumbed down so much. The masses have been dumbed down so much. That just trying to explain politics to them is damn near impossible. What are my thoughts on Bitcoin and crypto? That's a very good question as well. It's a far more fun question to answer, actually. Cryptocurrencies in the long run will work. And they are sustainable. Okay, the banks are trying to convince everybody that they're not and all this nonsense, right? But the reality is, cryptocurrency is the future. Okay? Will Bitcoin make it? Well, that's a tougher question to ask, because I would say that Bitcoin is going to keep going up in value, because unlike currency, it hasn't been devalued and it can't be devalued. Therefore, it will maintain its value over the long term, right? So it'll be around for about 5 to 10 years probably, maybe even 20 years. So you'd be doing a clever thing, I think. And I'm not giving financial advice to anyone, by the way, but you'd be doing a clever thing by putting your money in Bitcoin. And I'll tell you why. A lot of people say, well, it's digital, and I understand people's fears about that. But here's the thing. All money, fundamentally, is digital. The currencies that you're using right now are mostly digital. Most of the money isn't even in print. Okay, so if there's a digital crash, everything will crash anyway. The dollar actually is supposed to be backed by crude oil. The petrodollar, the emergence of the dollar as the petrodollar was really interesting because the delinking of the currency from the gold standard. That was Nixon that did that. But what that caused is an over-dependence on oil for the value of the dollar. Now, this is a double-edged sword, and it's a really serious problem. And Trump is actually wrestling with this right now, as is the Federal Reserve. Why? because we won't need oil anymore. Every major car manufacturer is shifting away from oil. It's all going to be electric from 2020. Okay? Some of them are putting it back to 2030, but actually all the technology is going in that direction. So oil won't hold its value, which means that the dollar will crash ultimately as well, which is why they have to move away from it and get back to the gold standard, or link it into Bitcoin, or get into some other type of blockchain cryptocurrency, because otherwise it won't work. Gold and silver are worth investing in as well. Somebody's asking that. Yeah, they'll hold their value. They're a store of value. Gold and silver, Bitcoins are a store of value. With Bitcoins, actually, it's a better idea, again, in the long run, because the price of Bitcoins can't be manipulated. With silver and gold, it can be, because of paper gold and paper silver. They can actually flatten the markets with that. It's very clever. Yeah, the Kabbalah, I've already spoken about that. The Kabbalistic texts are very complicated, and you have to spend a whole lot of time really reading them to understand. Okay, but to simplify it, you've got a light side of the Kabbalah, right, which is the tree of life, which is also adhered to by those persons that aspire to do great good. And then you've got the dark side of the Kabbalah, which is the Klipothic realm, which people have categorized as the demonic realm, which is basically a means and a ways to destroy people psychologically, emotionally, and mentally, and make them descend into nihilism and ultimately madness. There's two paths. Italy is next for bank failures? Maybe. It depends on how the euro will fare over the next coming time, because with the European Union disintegrating as it is, I can't see it surviving in the short term either, really, to be honest with you. I think what would have to happen is that in order for the European Union to survive, and in order for the ECB to survive, and the euro itself, they'd have to become way more totalitarian, these governments, which they probably will. But then they'd see a massive backlash from the populations. Well, Bitcoin isn't rising. This is the thing. Bitcoin's not doing any type of rising at all in value. The fluctuations you're seeing, and this is what I've been trying to explain to people when I made that video on the economy. The fluctuations you're seeing are down to the fact that the currencies are being devalued. It's the currency manipulation that is leading to these fluctuations in the Bitcoin marketplace. Yeah. The German banks are in trouble. That is true. Deutsche Bank, I think, is in trouble very seriously. They're leveraged up to their eyeballs. I mean, they're leveraged beyond any sustainable capital. So they're not going to survive. What's this? A mass shooting at a Texas church. Where is this? Is this just happening right now? Let me see what is going on here. I haven't kept up with the news today. Yeah, Bitcoin is actually being used to launder money by the Chinese, which is why it's holding its value. But that doesn't make it an evil thing. Yeah, the shooting in Texas, I'm just reading this just now. My God. Another shooting. in Sutherland Springs. Still an active gunman there, apparently. 16 shot. This makes me so incredibly angry to see these kind of things happen. You know, every time they do happen, I actually get outraged about it. It cuts into me to see this mass psychopathy in people that carry out these shootings. And it doesn't matter what ideology they conform to, the fact that they do these things. You know, people demonize the folks, but really, I'm hearing that the stream's gone off. Is it still broadcasting? I can't tell from this end. The software says okay, I think the stream cut off there midway. I'm not sure what happened there, because I was talking about this the shooting that happened in Texas, and then suddenly it just got shut down. I have no clue why. Is it live? Are you guys seeing this now? There we go. Okay, right. So I'll continue for another half hour. Is it still lagging? Okay, how's that? Is that? Oh, this is a. I wouldn't be surprised if there are people out there tinkering with the connection now. It's been madness trying to. Anyway, yeah. Okay, so yes, there's this Texas shooting that's happened, which is deeply sad, but we're seeing more and more of this. We're seeing more and more of this happening. It's a dreadful thing. It's dropping frames. I'm not sure what's causing the lag. Yeah, there's probably something going on to try and mess with the stream, to be honest with you. Anyway, we'll try and keep going here. We'll see what happens. We'll try and keep going. So have you folks got any other questions now? I'm just trying to read through the chat because I've missed a bit of it. Yeah, we're seeing the downfall of morality in the West, which is a great problem. What's going on with Saudi Arabia? Oh, that's a brilliant question. Yes, we're seeing a lot of moves being made. Prince Salman is cracking down on all these various factions there that have been trying to knife him in the back. So that's pretty positive. And we are seeing that the Podestas are also now being questioned by Mueller, which is a good thing. That's all probably interrelated. How evil is the Pope? Well, let's just put it this way. He's not a nice guy. He's trying to promote this liberation theology nonsense, which is basically communism through the back door as far as Christianity is concerned. Yep. Have I ever read The Anatomy of Evil? No, I haven't. But I'm probably going to get my hands on it from a friend of mine's very shortly. Do you think there's an agenda to kill the positive aspects of entertainment? Yes, I do. I absolutely do think that. Why are they doing that? Because as Plato pointed out, the stories that people tell are enormously powerful. Our stories mean something in civilization, right? The storytellers also represented in the age-old traditions the sages and the keepers of old wisdom. So by destroying entertainment, by destroying, whether it's intentional or otherwise, the destruction of entertainment in terms of real mediums is being also being done for nefarious purposes, unfortunately. Yeah, the Pope is a Jesuit, but more importantly, he's from South America, where liberation theology was propagated. So he's definitely not a good actor. Let's call it that, right? Because he knows what he's doing. He wants to import all these people in from third world countries that are changing the face of Italy and of Europe. He thinks that's a good thing. He's been reaching out to the Islamist theocracies, which, in turn is quite destructive for the West. No sane person would be doing that unless they were following, again, in the footsteps of these ideologically possessed human beings who really want to destroy every aspect of civilization. He's not a nice guy. Do you think the problem is capitalism? No, because capitalism, a lot of people don't even know. Capitalism isn't even a thing, actually, to be honest with you, right? The first time that the word capitalism was used is, in actual point of fact, by socialists, by Karl Marx, Marxists, right? Karl Marx said that in Das Kapital. He was the first one to really come up with this idea of capitalism. Initially, all it was free trade, right? Free markets, free trade really was where it was at for most countries. But once Marxism kicked in, then we saw the proliferation of these terminologies, thereby demonizing what should be trade between one person and another person. If you've got something that somebody else wants, well, you can dictate the terms of that, right? Or the other person has a choice, a voluntary choice, whether or not to buy that product or not. Yeah, the Church of Scotland is pretty messed up as well. The Calvinist movements and everything else that happened in Scotland, it really caused a serious downfall of the societies in Scotland, the cities and the villages and what have you. It just completely messed it up. Yeah, I think we could call it corporatism, John. I think that's what it fundamentally is. It's corporate oligarchy, I would call it. It's corporate oligarchy. It's become a kleptocracy, yes. It's become a kleptocracy over time. But initially, excuse me, initially the idea was to have monopolistic corporations take over some of the responsibilities of the state, which is basically corporate fascism in a nutshell. They've been promoting that. They've been promoting consumerism, where the human being is turned into nothing more than a consumer rather than a producer. Well, the Flavian Pisos created Zionism. They created Zionism. This is why I was saying earlier that there's a massive difference between the Holy Roman Empire and ancient Roman Empire. Okay, there's a big difference between these two things. The Holy Roman Empire was based in fascism. Now, see, a lot of people don't know. See, people get outraged when I talk about the Flavian Pisos because they don't understand that the Flavian Piso dynasty usurped power from the authentic Christian movement. They don't know this. They absolutely have no clue about this. Thank you. Rocking Mr. E has joined us as well. Thank you, sir, for joining us. So yeah, the Flavian Pisos took it over and made it into something that it should not have been, which is, to put it simply, a totalitarian fascist system. And they imposed this on people. But then what happened after that, you see, which is quite interesting, is that people like Thomas Aquinas and people like Francis of Assisi, St. Francis of Assisi, came along and they wrote quite extensively about those various things pertaining to the European philosophies which had helped those civilizations to develop. They started incorporating that into Christianity. So, in a sense, they took back power from the Flavian Pisos, but then it reverted again, you see, in modern times, thanks to the liberation theologists. That's what's happened. So, you see this kind of toing and froing inside the Roman Catholic Church frequently. But it's become something that is enormously destructive right now through the actions of various popes over the last, I'd say, 20 years, 30 years. It's actually quite a relatively new phenomenon. But yeah, you do get a lot of this. Is Christianity, Judaism, Islam born out of Atonism? Yes. To put it simply, yes. The idea, I actually have done a video on this, I just haven't uploaded it yet. But excuse me, the idea of the life-giving sun is one that stretches back to the beginnings of human civilization, because without the sun, of course, life cannot be sustained on this earth. But what happened was the atonistic worldview over time again was subverted by people who held the inverse view. And that's the cult of the black sun, the circle of the black sun. People don't understand this, right? That's where you get the flip side of it all. The atonists have their problems, but they weren't all out evil. Whereas there are people who are, because the circle of the black sun, the reason they use that representation is because without the sun, life dies. So they're a death cult. That's the easiest, simplest way I can put it. They're a death cult. Right? So that's why they use that symbolism. Which came first, Atonism or Zoroastrianism? That's a really, really interesting question. I'm not sure on that. I don't think I'd be qualified fully to speak on that. The basics of Zoroastrianism, again, go further back than Zoroastrianism proper, as it were. So it could be that they probably emerged around the same time by my reckoning, possibly. But I haven't done enough research into that to really see. What else have we got here? Yeah, we need more experts in ancient history if you're to understand what's happening. That's absolutely true. There aren't enough people that have studied history proper, that is. The history that you're taught in schools, by the way, is a form of history that is written by the victors, as they say, right? It's propaganda, more or less. The stuff that they teach in schools is nothing more than propagandist garbage, which is sad. But too many people have been raised with this idea. They've been educated in the school since they were kids that view of history is the only correct view of history there is. Unfortunately, that's simply not the case. But yeah, that's what we're facing in this time. Mass ignorance, as I say. Yeah, history is mostly now Marxist propaganda. For example, the Soviets in every history textbook, at least when I was in school, and probably long before then as well, The Soviets are painted as the good guys because they went against the Germans, right? They're considered part of the Allied force, which they kind of were, but not really, because Soviet communism killed way more people. And yet, the history books paint Joe Stalin as a wonderful guy. I struggle with that. I struggle to understand what people get from that. What else have we got here? Do the dark occultists have names? Are they identifiable? Yes. Yes, they are. I'll give you one example of this. Again, as I say, I'll probably go into this in way, way more depth as the months go on. But one of the key families involved in this, one of the key dynasties involved in all of this, is the Dubignon family. Now, you won't have heard of this family. You won't have heard of these people at all. Okay? Because the controlled opposition people, and that's just one example, the controlled opposition people have been putting out, names, you name it, that are not really intricately connected at the top of the food chain. At all. Okay? But the fact of the matter is, the Dubignon family is one of the families that controls the bigger picture. Okay, like I say, that's just one example. Today, they go by the surname of Turner, in case you're wondering. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly how you spell it, John. Yep. They migrated from France about 200 years ago, roughly, and they were the ones that were responsible for setting up the Jekyll Island Club. Look into this, by the way, if you don't know this already, right? They're the ones that set up the Jekyll Island Club. And as a result of that, they also ultimately ended up founding the Federal Reserve. Okay, the Federal Reserve Act was passed because the Dubignon family insisted that that be done. One of their descendants, and I'm not even kidding about this, you really have to look into this to understand this. One of their descendants is Ted Turner, the guy who owns CNN. Yeah, that's it, exactly. Yep. You'll find all these links in there if you really look carefully at the various bloodlines that run this world today. Right, that's what it does come down to, but it's not the bloodlines that you've been told that it is, right? There's people that you've never heard of that look ordinary as you and me, that you wouldn't even consider to be powerful people, but they are. Okay, they genuinely are. And it's not just Ted Turner, I'm just giving him as one example. He's one of the descendants, but there's many other people. There's many other people that are a part of this, and over time, what I'll probably do is go into depth with who these people are. Yeah, the Sinclairs, that's another great example. I mean, there's like I say, there's 13 primary families that run this world in its entirety at the moment, and they're all a part of this cult of the Black Sun, the Circle of the Black Sun, as it's manifested today. Tina Turner. Actually, I don't know. That's an interesting one. Is Tina Turner related? I haven't really looked at that. It's possible. I doubt it. I love her music, but who can say? Let's see here. Yes, many US presidents are descendants of kings and queens. That's absolutely correct. Yep. They're elected, not they're selected, not elected. Yeah, see, this is something that a lot of people don't know. The Nazis were actually working for these nefarious forces. The Nazis were working with them and for them. And people don't understand this because they've been programmed again from the other side to believe that Nazism is the solution and that Nazis were the good guys. Right? National Socialists were just a part of the equation to further the agenda of totalitarian control so they could destabilize Germany. But again, if people really knew that, if people understood, this is what I was saying, people just aren't ready for understanding a lot of things right now. They're too polarized, they're too possessed, they've been programmed too much by people who want to see them die, quite honestly. Yeah, I mean, how is it that these things worked out the way they did, with the establishing of Israel and all the people that that managed to make it economically successful? That's an important question for people to ask. Yeah, I'm talking about Hitler and the National Socialists. I'm not talking about this nonsensical garbage about neo-Nazis. Neo-Nazis aren't Nazis in the first place. But, there's a lot of left-brain imbalance in a lot of people right now. And on the other side of that equation, you've got people with right-brain imbalance. People want authority figures to tell them what to do. That's the fundamental problem. Oh, the royal bloodlines are connected to this in ways you can't imagine. Right? The royal bloodlines are absolutely involved in this. Excuse me. Yeah, there are no more Nazis left. They were all eradicated after World War II. This is something that the radical left doesn't understand. Why are Hitler and the Nazis demonized so heavily in culture and media? Well, this is the Streisand effect. This is what a lot of people, again, don't understand, right? See, the people that are in control know exactly how you're going to act and react. They understand human behaviors better than anyone else, right? So they know that if they set it up this way so that it's verboten, if you can't speak about certain things, more people will gravitate towards that. It's very clever. How do I stay lean? By keeping active, quite honestly. That's what it really boils down to. There was a time when I actually put on a lot of weight, I have to say, and it wasn't a fun time. But I put on quite a lot of weight 2-3 years back. So I've been working that off essentially. How do you balance the mind so you're not left brain or right brain imbalance? That's a very good question. The way you stay balanced in your mind is by acknowledging information that's given to you, but not accepting it until you've analyzed it properly, until you've logically analyzed it. So you have to use your abilities to think rationally, to discern. And also, don't allow your emotions to get the better of you. That's what I would say to that. Thoughts about Switzerland and the Swiss banks. I've already covered that earlier on, but I'll say this again. That's an integral part of the puzzle to understand how the economic system works, the financial system. Because the banking cartels are all controlled at the very top of the food chain by the Bank of International Settlements, which is in Basel, in Switzerland. And it's a country all of its own. The bank's headquarters are a country all of their own, just like the Vatican is, just like the City of London is. Okay? Yeah, the House of Windsor isn't actually English. They changed their name to the House of Windsor. Previously, they were the Saxe-Coburg-Gotha family. They were from Bavaria. You'll find that all of these groups, by the way, all these controllers, you can trace their roots all the way back to Bavaria. And before Bavaria, they were Turkish. And before they were Turkish, they were Babylonian. Okay? So it's quite extensive, this malevolent force that has been at work in this world. They've been operating here for a long, long time. What else have we got here? Yeah, the idea of the controllers is basically to keep everybody in an unhealthy state of being, in body and in mind, right? So they're putting stuff into the diets of people that is ultimately destructive. It's very damaging to your health. What is the House of Windsor's current influence? Well, they're not the most influential, but they're bit part players in something greater. And it's not a good game, let's say. It's not going to result in anything usefully progressive for human beings. It'll be great for them, but not for you. Bavarian Illuminati or Spanish Illuminati? Bavarian. Yep. How much do Jews actually influence Western politics? Well, it depends on which Jews you're talking about. There's actually different tribes of Jews. Okay? This is what nobody understands. Because what's happened very clearly... See, these folks have gone by many, many different alliances and monikers. Okay? They've gone by all kinds of things. All kinds of religions. Which they invented, by the way. But in terms of the genetic lineages, see, the people that were in the Semitic regions, the Semites, they were of all different types of belief system. And you get the Mizrahi Jews, for example. You get the Ashkenazim, and so on. But the Ashkenazim did not start out in Israel, in Palestine. They didn't start there. They were originally Khazarians, as everyone knows, right? And before that, they were Turkish. Would you say it's a good idea to read the Talmud if one hasn't already? Yes. I would strongly encourage anyone to read the Talmud. Because that is the only way you'll understand the supremacist ideology which is embedded in it. Which is not authentic Judaism, by the way. It's not Orthodox Judaism. But it is a faction of Judaism. Just like you have Wahhabist Islam or what have you, right? You get different tribes that believe different things. Is the vegan agenda a Marxist Agenda 21 plan? Yes and no. Veganism, by and large, is a stance that should be taken on ethical grounds or moral grounds once you've thought through whether or not it's an ethical thing to do. Right? But there are also groups out there that are promoting that in order to make people... in order to demonize people, basically, by restricting their diet. Control of diet is something that all of these supremacist groups do, by the way. Let's see here. There was another great question that I saw. Let me see if I can find it here. What are my thoughts on Justin Trudeau? I think he's a dolt. I have no idea how the people were conned into electing him in Canada. I literally can't work it out. It must have just been because of his hair. I think what happened in Canada was that women there, because they outnumber men, felt that he was a better representative of the feminist ideology which they'd been told was good for them. I think the women's vote there made a massive difference and put Trudeau into power. Yeah, Weishaupt was a Jesuit. That's absolutely correct. Cultural Marxism became a thing in the 1960s. Yes, it did. The hippie movement was started by again these very same people. It goes back to Marcuse essentially, who was promoting this free love movement. He started it all. Okay, he was promoting it because if anyone was a prude sexually, they were considered to be a fascist. So because he reinvented the term. I don't think anyone should stay in Canada, by the way, in the long term. I think Canada is it's like Sweden basically. It's a lost cause at this point. There are countries that can be saved, though. Yeah, Trudeau won because of feminism and legal weed. Well, that was exactly it. And because he was a ski instructor and a substitute drama teacher, which makes him apparently immensely qualified for the job. Holland probably will emerge from this okay. Yes, Holland will emerge intact. Um, Can Britain be saved? That's a big question. That's a question I'm wrestling with right now, and a lot of Brits are. It's a tough one. Because over in Britain, what's happened is people have shifted way to the left. The governments are leftist, and that is to say that the Conservative Party is leftist in ways that people still haven't fully understood yet. Which is why they're embracing all of this nonsense about feminism. They're also embracing this nonsense with this harassment scandal garbage to try and force out male members of the cabinet, which will lead to an implosion in the Conservative Party. But that's what feminism does, of course. It's designed to destroy. And then we're going to see quite possibly Corbyn being elected, because that's the other choice in the dialectic, isn't it? And that's the Labour Party, the Socialist Party, which would end up destroying Britain in the long run. So I think the people of Britain could quite possibly save Britain, but I don't think the government of Britain is actually going to be able to do that, because they seem to be interested in expanding totalitarian control. Can America be saved? Absolutely. Absolutely. America is the one country that can and will be saved. In fact, I'm going to make this a prediction. America will absolutely survive this. There's a reason behind that, though. But what has to happen is that civics needs to be taught in America again. You know, they used to teach civics in schools back in the day, and they don't anymore. Well, that's what needs to happen once more. Let's see, what else have we got here? I'm going to wrap the stream up in about 5 minutes anyway. What is my prediction on the NHS? The NHS is a mess. It's a complete mess right now. They'll probably end up creating a system akin to what's already operational in the US, where extortionate prices are paid for insurance. And I think that's kind of really the direction they're going in at present. Let me see here. What about America's demographics? They don't look very good. No, they don't look great. They don't look great. But here's the thing. What will happen is, after all the civil discord in the United States, what will happen is there will still be substantial enough numbers of white people and other intellectuals to actually stand against the malevolent forces there. That will happen. But we're talking way in the long term, by the way. I'm not saying that America's going to recover overnight and suddenly that every American's going to take back their own power into their own hands, right? That's not going to happen straight away. That's something that will happen probably a decade, 2 decades, possibly 3 down the line. The Americans have one advantage, and that is their guns. See, the elites, what they did was they disarmed everybody else right across the face of the earth, which makes a population docile and gullible, and it gives in to whatever the demands of government are. America isn't designed to be like that. Yes, more people need to be made aware of natural law and objective right moral action and objective wrong actions. That's absolutely correct. The current viewpoint that's being thrown out there is this Darwinist garbage, this moral relativism. And that's being done because, again, it serves the agenda, as you rightly point out. Can Germany be saved? I'm a little bit more skeptical about that. Because Germans have this overwhelming guilt, as I was saying earlier, with what happened in World War II. And they've been forced to feel this guilt to such an extreme that everyone's afraid to actually show any hint of going against this Marxist doctrine. I don't think Germany can be saved. You see, unlike America or even Britain to some degree, the Germans have been made to feel ashamed completely of their heritage. So all the Germans today have grown up with this dislike and distaste for any sentiment or nationalism or anything like that at all. Yeah, it's going to end up being the new Turkey, basically. It's quite sad to see that. But most of Europe is actually going to be engaged in a civil war a few years from now. I'm not kidding about that. That is going to happen. You don't believe America can survive? I think it can. I think it can, because the ideals enshrined in the Constitution and the preamble to the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights guarantee certain ideas stay alive. They live through the ages. And there are enough people who imbue those ideals in America to keep that flame alive. The problem, however, with America is that there are too many people in the coming generations that have been brainwashed. And they're willing to tear up the Constitution. They're willing to tear up the Declaration of Independence. They're willing to burn their whole country down. So that's the challenge America faces. But I think it will face it head on. A one world currency, well, that's very likely to happen anyway, because by the time that the petrodollar collapses, the IMF will have brought in something called SDRs, which are special drawing rights. So that's inevitable. Yeah, we're heading towards a one world government, basically. That's ultimately what's happening. Yep, what people have to realize in America is that people's militias are going to be the only things to stand in the way of absolute tyranny. You see, there's a difference between a militia and a military, and people aren't taught this. A militia is formed by the people and then disbanded once the tyranny has been defeated. Whereas a standing army is a whole different kettle of fish. The standing army serves the state ultimately. That's not to say a standing army isn't useful, and it's not to say that the army itself is in any way unpatriotic. Of course it is, right? But the fact of the matter is that when a state starts behaving immorally, when governments start to behave completely immorally, which any government can, then it's the job of the people to correct their course. Yeah, Sweden's toast just a few days ago. I was reading about this. The thing that happened with the bombing in Malmo. I don't know if you guys know about this. There was a bombing in a nightclub in Malmo, and that's just one example. They've had, as Anarcho-Autism points out, they've had 13 bombs in 25 days in Sweden. So it's not a good state of affairs as far as Sweden's concerned. They're screaming about doing something about it at this point, but it's too late already. People have been asleep at the wheel. So Sweden's done. I can't see Sweden surviving because there are large... Let me tell you something, by the way, about Sweden. There were areas inside Sweden that were controlled by the Hells Angels, right? And they were one of the biggest cartels operating in Sweden. So the Islamists came in and they scared the Hells Angels out of those areas. That's something to think about. So Sweden, there's no going back for them at this point, I don't think. In Canada, expect 1 million immigrants every 3 years. Yep, yeah. Canada is going down the same roads. Canada's absolutely going down the same roads. I can't see Canada surviving, even if they were to vote in, and I say this having a lot of friends in Canada, by the way, even if they were to vote in a conservative government, they wouldn't be able to repeal the laws that have been set in motion already, because their system of government is actually, it runs parallel to the elected government. Yep. Yeah, government and politics literally attracts these psychopathic criminals. Like I said, it's a filtration system, so they pick out the people that are the most psychopathic, the most criminal. They put them into particular positions. They pick out the others, put them into other types of positions. Those who are non-psychopathic and empathetic are put into different categories. Everyone's boxed up in ways that they don't understand yet. As I say, they're going to try and impose a completely eusocial system. Will Brexit come to pass? Yes, but it will not happen immediately, and the time that it will take for it to happen is quite probably going to allow for Britain to sink further into the pit. That's my problem with it. It's not going to be an authentic, true, complete Brexit straight away. It won't be a hard Brexit. It's going to be delayed. And that's the fundamental issue with it. Denmark, Austria, Hungary, and Poland will be just fine. Okay, they'll be just fine. In terms of what's going to happen in Europe, because some people are asking about, that's what's going to happen, right? They'll be fine. But they'll be the last strongholds in defending the Western ideals. The world in 10 years is not going to be a nice place, let's put it that way. Okay, you're going to see sporadic civil disorder break out in places, and militarized police forces will be used to curtail the freedoms of people. That's what's coming. And it's going to be much worse than you think. Do I think we need government? Okay, that's a great question. It's the last question I'm going to answer, and then I'm going to shut the stream down. Okay, but as an anarchist, I don't believe that people should ever hand over their responsibility as citizens and individuals to any sort of institution. Okay? I don't think that that is the way to go, to absolve yourself of the responsibilities that you have to society. However, here's the thing. We're at a point now as human beings where we've been so dumbed down and so pushed down and beat down that people are demanding that government take care of them. People are demanding it. So if people voluntarily demand that government take care of them, it's hard to see how people can survive without it. See, I'm also a realist, so I understand that where people are today, right now, means that they can't break free of this control system. Government is the problem, but you also have the problem of centralized banking, you have the problem of indoctrination, you have the problem of ideologies that are spreading like wildfire. It's actually, I wouldn't call it a psychological problem exactly, but it's a problem of battling ideas. It's a problem of battling ignorance more than anything else, because government's just an idea at the end of the day. And so, if more people understood that, see, there's no such thing as anyone really having any power over you if you don't give in to their demands, right? If you don't believe in their rules. Because the rules are so unjust, the rules are so completely wrong, that I think you'd have to be nuts to actually give in to the demands of government at this point in time. That being said, not enough people get that, so they do give in. They don't realize that they themselves have an innate power to push against the government. They're too frightened. They're too scared of losing their comfort. They're too afraid of losing their lives. They're too afraid of everything. They're too afraid of standing up and doing something. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there for this live stream. But thank you very much for joining me for it. It's been an absolute pleasure. There have been some really interesting questions. And I hope to talk to you all again soon. Take good care of yourselves.